both, in a way which confused categories. The subjects and titles of several poems compounded the problem, and its pleasures. An 18th century Calvinistic hymn, 4 19th century burials. 9 years after The Wasteland, poetry readers were used to seeing the old laws flouted, but Eliot and Pound and Co. did their flouting in the open, using broken forms which reflected the fragmented interior worlds of their poems. Betjeman's rebellion was to put his new wine in old bottles, to make the staid Victorians dance, to see the airiness as well as the pathos of fast-vanishing things, and to put details into the tradition, all those place names and ecclesiastical subgroups, while producing unofficial elegies for it. There's a word for this: camp, meaning to make light of what is in fact taken very seriously. And what Mount Zion did was to introduce into British poetry a voice that makes better use of the camp range, of its subtle opportunities, unexpected depths, and defended tendernesses, than any other modern poet. It is the single most significant quality of the early work in Betjeman's collected poems. But because the register of his camp is so readily mistaken for mere silliness, and because its texture has a delicacy which can easily be overlooked, it might also count as a drawback. So it's worth emphasizing that although Betjeman wrote a lot of funny poems and said a lot of funny things, his camp, and the instinct for self-protection upon which it feeds, has its origin in very unfunny experience. It's this experience which forms the bedrock of all his work and guarantees its fundamental seriousness. In his verse autobiography Summoned by Bells, Betjeman admits to the embarrassments and difficulties of growing up in wartime England with a name that sounded German. "Your name is German, John. But I had always thought that it was Dutch. That TJE, that fatal TJE, which I have watched the hesitating pens of government clerks and cloakroom porters funk." I asked my mother. "No," she said, "it's Dutch. Thank God you're English on your mother's side. Oh, happy, happy Browns and Robinsons." It wasn't just the TJE that was fatal. There was the question of whether his name ended in N or double N, too. And although Betjeman would have pooh-poohed the idea of submitting the name problem to a thorough Freudian analysis, there's enough readily available evidence in the poems to prove that his upbringing was fraught with issues of belonging, identity, acceptance, and tradition. It helps to explain why, through his prep school, then Marlborough, and even more explosively at Oxford, he went out of his way to cultivate the cultivated, as well as the rich and titled. It also sheds light on why he preferred the old forms in his writing. He wanted to be himself, to maintain a watchful distance, but he also needed to develop contacts with the national past, and particularly with the Victorian period, which represented striking stability and prosperity, because his personal past was less than he wished it to be. Not only less in the sense of awkwardly foreign, either. Less because less grand. Around and beneath the formative name drama lies an even more vitalizing difficulty: Betjeman's relationship to his father, as both man and tradesman. Betjeman Sr. spent all his life in the family firm, founded in 1820, making furniture and such like, most of it for the luxury market, Maharaja's dressing cases, the Tantalus on which the family fortune had been made, the Alexandra Palace patent lock, the Betjeman trolley, etc. Although many of these objects were extremely beautiful and produced to a very high standard, the young Betjeman spurned them, along with the idea that he should enter the family works. He would have been the fourth generation of the family to do so, but this was not the kind of tradition he wanted. It was trade, and therefore beneath him. Betjeman Sr. was understandably upset by his son's decision, and by the feelings which informed it. He might have felt a bit baffled, too. Weren't these Tantaluses and so on a domestic equivalent to much of the architecture that Betjeman spent his life defending? Their relationship suffered accordingly, though Betjeman generally had the good grace to keep quiet about this, in print at least, during his father's lifetime. But after his father died, he turned to write about him at regular intervals, and what had once been a figure of fun and dislike became deeply touching. So touching, in fact, and so haunting, that Betjeman Sr. lives through the collected poems, let alone Summoned by Bells, as a quietly admonitory spirit, deaf, suffering, pathetic, and terminal. O little body, do not die. You hold the soul that talks to me, although our conversation be as wordless as the windy sky. So looked my father at the last, right in my soul, before he died. Though words we spoke went heedless past, as London traffic roar outside. Poems such as this, A Child Ill, appear to be a far cry from the campery of Mount Zion, and indeed, many of Betjeman's best poems have the same compelling clarity of utterance and directness of gaze. Yet they spring from similar ground. The campery is a form of protection for Betjeman's deepest feelings. It converts them into forms and a diction that is entertaining and unthreatening. The poems about his father show deep feelings with the protective veil ripped away. They are studies of remorse and self-accusation, howls about death in general, and the prospect of his own death in particular, and frettings about time. They prove his remarkable range as a poet, but they also show that its two opposite poles are connected. Given this, it's not surprising to find Betjeman searching time and again for a mood or a place he can consider safe. The word safe, or safety, appears like a nervous tick in his poems. Safe in bed, safe with old friends, safe in G.F. Bodley's Green and Browns, safe in the surge of undogmatic hymns. There are at least 10 uses of the word in the 100-odd pages of Summoned by Bells, and it connects with every one of his interests and allegiances. His passion for the seaside, especially Cornwall, which distills secure childhood memories of feeling coddled. His enthusiasm for parish churches and their time-honoured reassurances. His addiction to Victoriana, with its elaborate manifestations of solidity. Even his snobbishness forms a part of the pattern. It wasn't greed or the wish for an easy life that drew him to posh people. It was his sense of their ancient rootedness. And there's a camp manifestation too. Betjeman's notorious teddy bear, Archibald, much mentioned in his poems, much filmed in his films, and evidently much loved, is an image of childhood security, a hairy comfort blanket that he worked hard to blend with his own public persona. It's only a short step from Betjeman's search for safety to his devotion to things, to objects that defy the passage of time and accumulate significance as they do so. The few people to have written well about his work have often commented on this, enjoying the skill with which he uses hard facts and proper names to evoke time past. They're right to do so. He has a wonderfully sharp eye and brilliant memory, and a sure sense of the pathos which lurks in half-forgotten or easily missed details. In this respect, and paradoxically, his work recalls James Joyce, a modernist who revelled in the everyday, but whose experimental forms seem entirely at odds with Betjeman's own styles. The point here is not simply that things and the names for things are a self-sufficient pleasure. It's more that things become a means of conveying the strong feeling that Betjeman sometimes chooses not to deliver directly, either because the subject is especially inaccessible or awkward, or because his poetics require him to deal with sensations rather than thoughts. One of his best poems, Devonshire Street W1, is a good case in point. The street and consulting room which we see at the beginning of the poem act both as a background for the reticence which forms an important part of the poem's subject, and also as a way of dramatizing the unspoken fears of the two central characters, an elderly husband and wife. As readers, we are then allowed into the mind of the man and hear him wondering, why was I made for the long and the painful deathbed coming to me? It's a moment of shocking candour from which Betjeman characteristically turns away in the final quatrain to daily things. But this turning away is not an evasion. It's the means by which the wife simultaneously accepts her husband's reserve, finds brief comfort in the familiar, and registers a literally unspeakable sadness. She puts her fingers in his as, loving and silly, at long-past Kensington dances she used to do. It's cheaper to take the tube to Piccadilly, and then we can catch a 19 or a 22. Time and again in the collected poems, and throughout Summoned by Bells, things are trusted to carry a large emotional burden. The process has the great advantage of making the poem